So we are with Jim Sorensen, one of the two men behind Transformers Allspark Almanac Complete Edition. Is that the official title, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, you've sort of rearranged the words a bit.
Oh, well, what's the actual name?
The Complete Allspark Almanac.
Oh, beautiful. So,
short, sweet, to the point. I actually had been advocating for the Allspark Almanac Omnibus because I like the alliteration, but my editor did not.
Oh, that's unfortunate. So, the last time we spoke with you was about Transformers Legacy, and that was a few months ago. And what a great book.
Oh, thank you.
I love that book.
I heard your review of it. It was really flattering.
It's a great book. It's very, very pleased with that. I waited like a year and a half, or I forgot when I found out about it, but...
We announced it early because we wanted to be able to beat the drums and try and solicit the fans to help. And it was a good decision because it helped get us from 50-60% complete to about 95% complete. But it did mean that the idea of the book had been floating in the ethosphere for quite a while before it actually came out. So, some of that's my fault.
But you know what? Totally worth the wait.
Glad to hear it.
Loved it.
And we got it out in time for Christmas, so that was really, and we got it out in time for the 30th anniversary. Both goals of ours. We did not get it out in time for BotCon or the movie, which were other goals of ours. But
yeah, man, the movie really lifts things. It's kind of...
Yeah, a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah, totally does. Hey, so I have the first and second edition of, or the first and second volumes of the Allspark Almanac. But for those of us not familiar, so what is the Allspark Almanac? And what's the complete edition?
Well, the Allspark Almanac and the Allspark Almanac 2 were our attempts to make a comprehensive guide to the universe of Transformers Animated. And that was the third book that we'd done after the first two ARC books, which were black and white character design model books from the original Generation 1 series. And funnily enough, that was what we pitched to IDW for an animated book. It was called the ARC Animated, and we just wanted to do the character models. But because we had such a hard time finding the character models for Generation 1, we had sort of built in this huge runway for us to create the Allspark Almanac, or the ARC Animated, as we were calling it at the time. And we didn't need any of that because whereas with the Generation 1 material, we had to scour the world, literally. A lot of it came out of Japan and some of it came out of the United Kingdom. Not entirely dissimilar to how we put together Legacy. With Transformers Animated, we just drove to Burbank. Bill and I both lived in Los Angeles at the time. Now I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico. But we just drove to Burbank with a portable hard drive, and we said, give us all your character models. And about 20 minutes later, they said, okay, do you want anything else? And I said, sure, give us all the backgrounds. And they gave us that. And they said, do you want anything else? And I said, yeah, give us all the storyboards. And they said, okay, do you want anything else? Until I ran out of things to ask for. And then we had all this material and all this time, and it wound up making us want to use the time. I think, maybe the smarter thing to do would have been to just do the book that we'd pitched and then sit on our butts for 5 months and get paid exactly the same. But instead we decided, it might be fun to delve. It might be fun to explore the universe. So we wound up writing bios to all the characters, episode guide summaries. We tried to, since we had all the backgrounds, we tried to showcase those. We went into the different settings for sort of around the world, as well as more localized to Detroit. And we covered the first 2 seasons, and then it was incredibly popular. So we wound up doing a second volume, which covered season 3, and which, even though it was sort of a little less than half as many episodes, 13 as opposed to 29, because the scope of season 3 had expanded so much, they'd gone to Cybertron for the first time, and there were a whole lot of extras. We were able to make a book that was actually slightly bigger. So the Allspark Almanac 2 is 224 pages. 1 is 220 pages. And I think one of the things that people really appreciated was that we did the whole thing with very few exceptions from an in-universe perspective. So it wasn't a third-person omniscient narrator talking about the characters, and it wasn't me, Jim, talking about the characters. It was the characters talking about each other. And that we had established that format for the character bios, and then when we tried to do the episode guides, we realized that we had to change that up a little bit. So those tended to be even more fanciful. The simplest we would do would be just maybe a report from an Autobot or a log from a Decepticon. But in many cases, we found that we could push that envelope, and we could have the story of garbage in, garbage out told as a cereal box and things like that we were rather proud of.
I'd actually forgotten that you had approached this from a more like the ARC sort of perspective. So basically, they did all the work except for the being clever part.
They being Cartoon Network?
Yeah.
Well, they did all the work of giving us the material. There's very few original drawings or illustrations. There are a few. The aforementioned cereal box is one. But for the most part, we were using the character models, the backgrounds that they had.
Right. No. But what I'm saying is just the thing that people remember most fondly about it isn't just the material; it's the presentation.
Right.
And like you said, you kind of went all out, paid the same, but you really, I think you really knocked it out of the park with the Allspark Almanac.
Thanks. Well, and I think the fan response has borne that out. It's still after, at this point, this is our 11th book, if you count the collected volumes as separate volumes, which I do because I tend to put more material in and rearrange them, change the organization a little bit to make it more sensible. The context has changed, so I try to make the book reflect that. So this is the 11th book we've done, and by far we've had more reviews and feedback and just generally enthusiasm about the Allspark Almanacs than any of the other books. Legacy might eclipse that. It's hard to say because Legacy's only been out for about 3 months, and the other books have been out for about 4 years. But it's hard to say. And Legacy is such an iconic. It's something that people have been asking for decades, whereas animated hasn't even been around for a decade.
Yeah, so I love Allspark Almanac. I think like most people do. I know Chris McFeely dedicated like half his brain to it for a couple of years. So what's in the complete edition that's not in the original 2 volumes?
Well, the big thing is that we made about 22 extra pages for the fan club back in 2011. So BotCon 2011, they created a new, totally in continuity comic book set in the animated universe. They called it Season 3.5, The Stunticon Job, written by Marty Eisenberg, new character designs by Derek Wyatt, new toys to go along with it. Marcelo Materi did the artwork, and nobody does the animated art style, certainly in comic book form, the way Marcelo does. He really brings the images to life and makes it work. So they had done that in BotCon 2011. And then when the Diamond version of that comic came out, we had the Allspark Almanac Addendum, which covered that material. So those new character designs, as well as summarizing the Stunticon Job story, which is slightly odd because we printed the summary of the story in the comic book with the story itself. We also had the Moving Violations, which was the prologue to that by Trent Troop and Greg Sepelak. So, we summarized that as well and covered the out-of-universe stuff, so we covered the toys. That was the other thing about the Allspark Almanac, too, was that was where we went out-of-universe and covered the production of the show, as well as what Season 4 would have been like and some of the Season 4 toys that never got made. So we did that for the Almanac material, for the fan club material. And then we had 6 more pages over the course of 3 more issues of the fan club magazine where we did the same sort of thing. We had a couple of new bios, we had new pages that would sort of cover what we called culture in the book, so sort of the miscellaneous section. We covered the Mirror Universe, we covered the weapons of Team Char, and we did a nice musical poster for Rosanna, who's a singer from Kiss Players, who made her way over to I think from Kiss Players, who made her way over to Transformers Animated. So all of that was 22 more pages. All of that's in the book. So which has been published before, but I think quite a few people that are fans of the almanacs, the volume 1 and 2, won't have seen that. So that's new. And then on top of that, we managed to get about 10 new pages in. So with new Derek J. Wyatt artwork, mostly new pages. Some of them are slightly revised, or I shouldn't say slightly, or heavily revised versions of pages we'd already done, but with new artwork that's more in keeping with the artwork from the show. And I think those are pretty neat too. So the whole thing winds up clocking in at 472 pages. And again, if you're going to do the math, it was 220 on the first one, 224 on the second. That's 444, and then 22 for the fan club. That would be 466, and we're at 472. And there's some efficiencies that you can pick up because you don't need 2 table of contents, you don't need 2 acknowledgement pages, you don't need 2 title pages. So that's where the extra few pages come in.
So what you're saying is I kind of have to buy this now.
I think if you like the first 2, you kind of have to buy it. But I wouldn't feel too badly about it because the first 2 volumes seem to go for $50 to $100 on the secondary market. So if you really feel bad about it, I think it's about $28 on Amazon or $40 if you go to your local comic book shop. Get a couple copies, wait a year for it to be out of print, and then sell it for $50, $60, $70, and you'll come out ahead.
That's a great idea.
So.
Yeah, I was actually checking Amazon this morning, and it looks like both parts 1 and 2 were sold out. So that's one of the things I was thinking of is, were you doing this as another way to get this into people's hands because it's still so popular?
Absolutely. It's, one thing you never really want as an author is for your book to be out of print. It's great when a print run sells out, but then what you want is for your publisher to go ahead and do a second printing. Now, I believe the first volume of the Almanacs had 4 printings to date, and I think the second one's had 3. So they've been trying to meet demand, but they've been, it's hard to keep them in shelves. So I think one of the reasons IDW came to us wanting to do a complete volume was just so that in the future they can kind of try and keep it a little bit simpler for them rather than try to track 2 different products. They only really have to keep one. So I don't think volume 1 or 2 are ever going to be in print again. But there's really nothing in them that's not going to be in the complete volume, so I don't see that as so much of an issue. And then we got to fix some mistakes that were in the earlier ones, little minor things like typos. And one of the things that if you're a geek about publishing and writing, not sort of the story, but just the actual process of it, was because we were pulling from 3 different sources, we found there were little minor but annoying formatting differences, how we handled ellipses and how we handled hyphens and em dashes that we had to go through, sort of page by page and make consistent. Otherwise it would be annoying. Where exactly the numbers were on the bottom of the page, they might be off just slightly, but if you're going, because we integrated all the material, so it's not like we just ran the books back to front. We kept the same basic organizational structure. So chapter 1 is Autobots. So of course it's all the Autobots from volume 1, all the Autobots from volume 2, all the Autobots that we did in the fan club, some new Autobots that are sort of teasing season 4, or if there's more, season 3.5, and those are all together and rearranged a bit. We tried to keep all of the Elite Guard guys together, which meant that after Ultra Magnus and Sentinel and Jazz and Blur, then you have the Jet Twins, and then you have guys like Diatlas, and then you have the new Elite Guard guys that we might get from Fun Publication at some point. So we tried to make it as coherent and logical as possible.
That's great. So FYI, I just pre-ordered my copy.
Awesome.
So what's your favorite part about the new edition?
Definitely the new material. It's nice. It's nice, as you say, it's nice to get it back in print so that anybody who wants to get a copy can get a copy, at least until this volume sells out, which it hopefully almost inevitably will. But what I have a copy on my phone, proofing PDF, that every once in a while I say, oh, let me go look at my book because I'm an egomaniac. And the pages I find I get drawn to are the new pages. So, ooh, this is exciting. This will be fun. I can't wait till you guys see this.
I'm excited about it. So, where does this rank compared to the other, personally for yourself? Where does the Allspark Almanac rank with the other works that you've done?
It's hard to compare. It's like saying which of your children do you love the most. Definitely, I'm very fond of the Allspark Almanac. I think Legacy is another one that I'm incredibly proud of, and that we've been trying to get done for years, even before we started soliciting it, even before I pitched it to IDW. It was something that's been near and dear to my heart for a long time. So it's hard to compare that. And then there are the ARC books and the Joe books and the Art of Crime. I mean, I'm really pleased with all of them. So it's hard for me to say I like one more than the other. I mean, the ARC books were the first ones I've done. And there's something about black and white character models that I find sort of starkly beautiful. And I realize it's not, I think from an objective sense, the ARC books are not as good as the almanacs or Legacy. The material probably isn't as interesting, and the layout and presentation probably isn't as interesting. I got a chance to do the same sort of book for G.I. Joe. I did a couple of field manuals, which were basically exactly the same as the ARC, except it was a little bit more design heavy. We had sort of a grid background, and we included some file card information, and just those little touches. You know, if I was to do the ARC today, I'd probably, you know, not exactly like that, but I'd probably be closer to that than what I did. So, you know, so in a sense, I like the Joe field manuals better than the ARC books, but in another sense, you know, I'll always be pleased with the first work. You know, this is the first published work I had, so that's not a very good answer, but
no, I get it. I'm a big fan of the ARC and the field manual. I have them both. I ended up getting. I was to the party late with the ARC, so I got the complete edition.
Well, again, that's the better version to get.
So, but I mean, so there are like models left that you could cover, not necessarily just 2D, but like other series post G1 and things like that. There's always the opportunity to revisit that later if you wanted to. Just saying.
Well, one of the books I'd love to do is the ARC Bestiary, which would cover mostly Beast Wars 2nd and Neo. The trouble with Beast Wars is they don't have character designs in the same way. There are models that they use, but they're sort of 3D image files, and you'd have to, you know, get a sort of a printout of those or a render of those. But Beast Wars 2nd and Neo, and actually Car Robots, which in the States is Robots in Disguise, the cell-based Takara late 90s, early 2000 series, I think would make a really nice, really pretty slick volume. And I think actually Car Robots fits in with that very nicely. There's almost a nice little evolution where the good guys, the Cybertrons in Japan, start out as the beasts with the bad guys being the vehicles. And then in Beast Wars Neo, they're all the beasts. And then by Car Robots, you've reversed it, and the Autobots are the good guys, and the bad guys are the Predacons. So it sort of makes a nice transition. And it's all cell-based animation. I have all the models. So that's something I'd love to do. But, you know, the Beast Wars stuff so far hasn't sold as well. So, and actually the Japanese stuff hasn't sold as well either. The ARC 2 is probably, in terms of the 11 books I've done, that's definitely towards the bottom quartile of sales. So it's hard for IDW to necessarily think that this is the best use of their limited resources. Yeah. But I'd love to do it.
From our own internal perspective, I've seen that things like Armada, Energon, and Cybertron are becoming increasingly popular as people who grew up on that, which scares me, but it's true. Not from a show perspective, but from an age perspective, because I'm so damn old. But people who grew up on that now have disposable incomes, and people are really hungry for that material. So, you know, while it's 3D models, again, sort of like, you know, Beast Wars, you know, with Energon and Cybertron. I'm trying to remember. Armada was 3D too, right?
Armada was a mix.
They were all sort of, well, they were like, gosh, now Energon and Cybertron, they were cell shaded 3D models, and Armada was a mix. So I mean, but there's opportunity there as well. Just saying.
Oh yeah, no, I'd love to do that sort of material. And Legacy has been a really big hit. IDW is very pleased with our attempt to do a high format art book. So it's also possible that we might, you know, rather than do the 8.5 by 11 black and white sort of art book, that we might be able to do another oversized hardcover glossy paged art book. So and there's a lot of potential there. I mean, for Beast Wars, for G1, for the Unicron trilogy, and for the more modern material. Actually, the only one that in some ways I feel like we'd have a hard time doing is animated, and that's only because the complete Allspark Almanac and the 2 volumes of the Allspark Almanac did such a good job of getting virtually every official piece of artwork into print already. Like if we wanted to do Legacy 2, and cover box art for post G2 time frame, we've literally printed every piece of box art from Animated, every single one, with the exception of the fan club, the box for the Stundicon job, and I guess Jackpot, who was a fan club exclusive figure. But other than that, they're all in there. So I'm not sure we'd want to be redundant and print them twice, or maybe we would, maybe a representative sample, but that's actually that would actually be a challenge for future art books, finding a way to include Animated that doesn't feel as redundant to me. Though I suppose it's okay in that context. It doesn't have to be completely unique.
Do you have any other thing on the horizon that you can or can't tell us about right now?
Nothing I can tell you about specifically, but Bill and I are engines of creativity, and I think that there are quite a few books that we're either working on or pitching or trying to find the best venue for. So I suspect that before the year's out, you'll either have a new book for us or at least have a new opportunity to interview us about a solicitation.
Very cool. Hey, Diecast, do you have any other questions for Jim?
No, I think you covered everything pretty well.
Awesome.
So, Jim, anything that you want to tell the fans before we bid you adieu?
I just want to say thanks so much for supporting and being interested in the Allspark Almanac. If you like Volume 1 and 2, I really think you'll dig this one for about the $28 it is on Amazon. I don't think you'll go wrong with it.
Awesome. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you later.
Cheers.
闇の中も止まらずに前進笑顔が消えた街にしたのは誰全て金じゃなくて本音こんな宇宙を守れピースウォー超生命体トランスフォーマー